is Joran Lokkerbol. I was here in the morning, so I'll take one slide to introduce myself. I'm here to present on two examples of economic evaluations that we did in the Netherlands. So my background is in econometrics, a bit of health economics, and then I specialized in data science and machine learning. I work at the MERRPS Institute, which is the Netherlands Institute of Mental Health and Addiction, where I'm heading the Center of Economic Evaluation and Machine Learning. And I have a position as data science lead at a Dutch mental health care institution in setting up the data science team. So briefly on the activities that we do at the Center of Economic Evaluation at MERRPS Institute. So we obviously do the classical economic evaluation, so trial-based and model-based, trying to figure out which interventions generate health effects and the rest price. Slowly evolve more and more in the societal cost benefits analyses, so trying to map out which stakeholders are affected over time financially by national policy. And in the last roughly 2 years, we are involved more and more in predictive analytics, so using machine learning as a means to try and make clear how it would be possible to improve cost effectiveness through So I'm here to give two examples. One of a very classical economic evaluation, trial-based, and a second one of the predictive analytic type. So the first example. Okay, the logo disappeared. Just a word on the Netherlands Organization for Health Research and Development, which is sponsoring most of our work. So the first case is about a cost effectiveness trial on preventing psychosis. I chose this example because of the impact it ended up having, which is not common for economic evaluations, I have to admit. But in this case, something happened, and that was mainly because the study showed that costs could be saved by doing this kind of prevention. So this was a study looking at preventing first episodes of psychosis for people with also high risk of developing their first episode of psychosis. I think a similar study was done in the UK. So it's a very so all my pictures are gone. I hope someone left. Okay.
Well, you will use some different version of.
Yeah.
Well, I can try to export it and reload it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. This one wasn't. Here the pictures weren't too functional, so but I just
impressive evaluation.
Yeah. yeah. I just depicted some guidelines. I wanted to say that it's a very classical complex evaluation, and that kind of work is really well supported by the guidelines, and so that's really helpful. And in the predictive analytics that we'll see later on, we don't have the luxury of those guidelines. So I just wanted to mention that. Quickly on the design of the study. So we looked at people in the Netherlands at also high risk of developing their first episode of psychosis. So that means that it's possible to select people who have a risk of about 25% to develop their first episode of psychosis. These people were given either care as usual, and a word on that. So this ultra high risk population is selected from the patient population that enters specialized mental health care for a different reason. So they enter specialized mental health care to be treated for anxiety or depression. And so we compared this group with the second condition, where people were still just being treated for anxiety and depression or whatever the reason was for them entering specialized mental health care. But then adding 10 sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy specifically aimed to prevent the first episode of psychosis. Then the study looked at onset of psychosis, quality of life, and healthcare costs, and did that over a period of 4 years. Right. So quickly running through the effects. So verbal access shows the transition to psychosis, and then that was measured at two time intervals, so after 1.5 years and after 4 years. And so after 1.5 years, we saw that roughly 24% of people in the care as usual condition developed their first episode of psychosis, whereas only 10.5% developed their first episode of psychosis in the intervention condition, which is a huge effect. And then, of course, there was the concern that the development of the first episode of psychosis would just be postponed. But then the 4-year measurement showed that it didn't tend to pick up. And so people so there's a certain age range that is associated with the high risk of development of the first episode of psychosis. And so the hypothesis now is that this type of treatment can help people to cross the tricky age range. So a very large effect. And then in terms of costs, so don't mind the numbers, but the overall cost in the group that was receiving this additional type of prevention was quite a bit lower than the cost for the people that did not get the type of prevention. Simply because there's more instances of psychosis in the more expensive condition, and obviously psychosis is associated with large healthcare costs. So we found an average cost saving of roughly 4,000 per person that was offered this type of prevention. This is not taking into account productivity gains, which were measured in the study, but we didn't include them here. The quality of the measurement wasn't perfect, but you can imagine that when you prevent psychosis, that pays off in terms of productivity gains. Okay. That was a picture. It wasn't too functional after a minute with all these figures that are disappearing, but just a picture showing that given the uncertainty that there was around cost and around effect, there was a very high probability of this prevention being cost effective. Obviously, because it's on average cheaper and it's more effective. In fact, there's something coming up. So this is something that the field wanted, because there was always the consensus that it would not be possible to, up to a couple of years ago, that it wouldn't be possible to prevent psychosis. And then the evidence was there, but the problem is that the Health Insurance Act normally doesn't fund prevention. It only provides budget when there's an actual diagnosis. But now we're trying to prevent the diagnosis. But because the mental health institutions wanted this to happen, but also the insurance companies were eager because of the cost saving within the period of 4 years. The Dutch healthcare authority allowed this type of prevention to be offered in mental health care institutions. So they set up this loophole where it's possible for the people providing prevention to write their time on the DRG that people are treated for when they enter specialized mental health care. So they enter specialized mental health care to be treated for either anxiety or depression or whatever, and then they are screened. And when they turn out to be ultra high risk, it's possible to fund that prevention by writing on the anxiety DRG or depression DRG. And so the current standard practice in some of the large mental health institutions is now to screen everyone entering specialized mental mental health care. It's a really brief screening instrument, which is a two-step screening instrument, and so that's very nice. That actually seems to have changed clinical practice. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's not very common for studies on economic evaluation to actually change clinical practice, but the fact that it's cost saving really helped here. So that was example one. The other example I wanted to give is in the field of predictive analytics. It's a challenge. So I had a picture up of a picture that I found when I googled on machine learning, and one of the first pictures I found was a robot standing in front of a blackboard, sort of seemingly overthinking his life over there. And the point I wanted to make was that machine learning tends to be mystified, which is a really unhelpful starting point to just think about what it can do and how it could contribute to more effective mental health care systems. So just to narrow down what it actually comes down to, machine learning is nothing more, but also nothing less than a type of analytics concerned with prediction or classification based on example data. That's what it is. But the nice thing actually here is that machine learning tends to work a whole lot better on observational data than on experimental data. So observational data just being the data that mental health care institutions or insurance companies gather by doing what they do.
I will try to switch the slides, right?
Okay, yeah, that'll be nice. And so what we normally saw up to this point is that evidence was being generated using experimental data, so data being collected just for the purpose of answering one research question, and so that always left mental health care institutions or insurance companies wondering, how they could leverage all the data that they have, and so that's the nice thing about machine learning. Right. Oh, okay, it's a PDF.
And the previous user who know how to make it to the whole screen.
So one thing I wanted to highlight is that
Doesn't work.
Yeah, it is working. Oh wow. Okay.
But without colors.
So we can find the slide.
Everything in life.
Look, there's the robot. Right, so yeah, okay. Okay, so just to highlight this distinction, which is really important in my perspective. So machine learning is considered with answering either prediction or classification questions, and what I see in the Netherlands is that there's such a strong tradition of tackling effect questions that it's really difficult for a lot of researchers I talk to even be aware of the fact that there are other types of questions that can be answered. So just to highlight this distinction, a typical prediction question is predicting the weather. A typical effect question would be to ask, like, what's the effectiveness of treating people with post-traumatic stress disorder with EMDR. And just to make that one level more abstract, prediction questions are concerned with knowing how the world will present itself such that you can have an adequate response to it, whereas effect questions typically should give us information on how to optimally change the course of the health of a patient. And that's so those are different types of questions, and so the general type of research that's being done is in this area, whereas machine learning tackles a different type of question. And so the nice thing is that that observational data is perfect for these kind of questions, whereas experimental data is perfect for these kind of questions. But what I saw happening in the Netherlands is that for the longest time, people didn't take observational data seriously or didn't know how to handle it, discarding it from this kind of perspective, so saying it's not useful to answer effective questions, which is true, but it's still useful to answer prediction questions. And so actually they belong together. These kind of questions. Machine learning is concerned with prediction, and would help us to answer the question: can we see trouble coming? Usually with a patient, can we see the onset of first episode of psychosis coming? Can we see it coming that someone will make an attempt to commit suicide, etc., etc.? And then the logical follow-up question is what can we do about it? So they belong together. These kind of questions. And so what I'm currently trying to do is to tackle a subclass of machine learning project in which we already know what to do about the trouble that we can see coming with machine learning. So trying to use machine learning as the missing link. So try to find problems where just being able to see who will get certain poor outcomes is the only point that's missing to further healthcare. And so one of these class of problems is basically all the type of problems for which there is evidence-based prevention, so effective or cost-effective prevention. So there's a couple of things that we know how to prevent in an effective or cost-effective manner, such as suicide, first depression, and psychosis. And then the question that's still open is who are actually the people that we need to give this prevention to. So it's the prediction problem that is sort of the missing link between clinical practice and between knowing who to provide this effective prevention to. Then the second class of projects that I find really interesting and that I'm currently working on is the setting where there is really clearly defined clearly guideline-defined step care. So take for example treatment of bipolar disorder. If the first-line treatment would be to provide people with lithium, they have a lot of example data in your healthcare institute with people being diagnosed with bipolar disorder and getting lithium. And so lithium will not help with every patient, and if it doesn't work, then you have to you keep trying for a bit. You might get the side effects, and then you stop providing lithium, and then after a couple of weeks you start your second line treatment. But it's a purely prediction problem to try and predict who will be helped with lithium and who won't be, and if there's a subgroup of patients for which the probability will be really low that they will respond to lithium, then you might be able to save them this the time and the pain, etc. To try a medication that ends up to be not working. The last category mainly refers to any type of monitoring or screening that is already happening, which could be improved by machine learning, by making more fine-grained subclasses of people with either high risk or low risk. So So last slide, and then I round up. So what? So the second class of problems where there is a clearly defined order in the type of health in the type of care that people receive. So small project that we now receive some seed funding for is that we try to predict who will be helped with basic mental health care treatment in the Netherlands. So that's a fairly short type of treatment. So what we see is that quite a group of patients after receiving this basic mental health care treatment still ends up going to specialized mental health care treatment. So we try to develop prediction models that can tell clinician and a patient halfway this basic mental health care treatment what the probability is that they will actually respond to this treatment. And that opens up the possibility to consider referral to specialized mental health care treatment sooner rather than just sitting out basic mental health care. There's one additional puzzle that we try to tackle in this project, which is labeled as federated learning, which is trying to abide to the GDPR by creating models that are being created not by having all the mental health institutions share their data, but everyone keeping their data within the institution and having the algorithm sort of travel through the different institutions and then basically ending up with an algorithm that would be similar as in the scenario where all the data actually would have been combined. So that's the second example that I wanted to share. I'm most enthusiastic about that part, but I really like this. I really like this stuff, and so that's the type of things I'm working on. So, provide you with two examples, and that's why I wanted to leave it.